Hey y'all, welcome to the third sidebar of season 2. I told y'all this is about to get good. I don't know why y'all don't be believing me. But anyway, before we get into it, let's recap. The last sidebar covered episodes 7 through 13. In that sidebar, we answered a question. Why? We basically got a better understanding of why Shelonda loved Antonio so much, since we answered the question of how in the first sidebar. In the last sidebar, we learned that Antonio was sweet and generous to Shelonda in a way that was far different than how he was perceived to be by most other people. He showed her a different side of life and elevated her sexually. Covering that and answering the question of why provides an amazing segue to the sidebar. Keeping in line with answering the questions, I think we'll let this sidebar focus on the question of who. Who is Shelonda? And I think these episodes give some amazing insight into that. So let's get started. Episode 14, Handling Business. After signing everything over to Shelonda, Antonio starts the process of preparing her to take over while he's away. The first thing that he does is recruit Peaches to assist. This is a move that baffles Shelonda. She can't understand the relationship between the two. She mentions that it's not a clownfish and an anemone relationship, but more like a killer whale and a sardine. You learn a little bit more about the nature of Peaches and Antonio's relationship down the line. Either way, Peaches agrees, and Shelonda is grateful to have someone familiar on her side. At some point, Antonio issues a warning to Shelonda. He reminds her that Peaches is a shrimp, and she has to watch her. That becomes ominous down the line. 2 weeks later, everything blows up. After they go to see Blow, a movie about the rise and fall of a drug kingpin, Antonio is pulled over for not using his turn signal. Obviously wanted for the probation violation, he gets arrested. He issues another warning to Shelonda before going away. He tells her not to let the life swallow her up, which obviously happens. After going for a bond hearing, the judge sets the bail for $5,000. Antonio advises Shelonda not to pay the money because he doesn't want to take anything away from what she should have on hand. Shelonda is crushed, but she's also impressed by the level of love and commitment that she feels Antonio has for her. And when it's all said and done, he's sentenced to 3 years, which means Shelonda is officially in charge. Shelonda goes in and immediately starts changing things. She fires the girls that Antonio has working at the other businesses and takes over the day-to-day operations herself. She changes the business structure. Basically, she added an account to funnel in the drug money. She basically make money off of the drugs and deposit that money into a secondary account. To explain the deposit, she'd throw a huge event and say that that's where the money came from. Initially, it was all good, and she followed the script down to the letter. But as a little bit of time passed, she made a crucial observation. She realized that Antonio was bringing in far more money than she could have imagined. She began to understand that there were areas of her life that shouldn't ever have been a struggle for her. However, she looked at what Antonio was willing to contribute to. He got her breasts done, but he didn't contribute to her college education. That thought brought Shelonda to the realization that Antonio paid for things that made him look good. And while she wasn't in denial about the fact that she had benefited from those things, Antonio was locked up. The risk was hers at that point. Why would she only do what made him look good when she was the person who was on the line? So she decided to start skimming off at the top to give herself the life she wanted. And because there was so much coming in, she knew Antonio wouldn't ever know. And she did it well. After 6 months of running the businesses on her own, she no longer had to alter the books the way she did when Antonio was there. Everything legitimately matched up. She just ended up wanting more. Episode 15, A Star is Born. Antonio had been away for a year, and Shelonda was handling everything perfectly fine. The money was all in order. She was able to report that everything was good to Antonio, and his name was still good in the streets. So why did anything change? Well, it goes back to the question that we posed at the beginning. Who is Shelonda? It obviously gets bigger each time she chooses to admit something. Shelonda chooses to skim some money off of the top to make things fair. And I think most people would understand why she didn't want to do all the work and just take what Antonio was willing to give her. But now she introduces something completely different. Shelonda says, if I have to be honest, there was no reason for me to have done what I did. I guess the best explanation is that I was seduced by the power. I had more money than I could spend, and certainly more than I'd ever had. I didn't need anything more. There often comes a point in life where you have to say enough is enough. At that point in time, it seemed that there was never enough. That would be my downfall. Shelonda had the necessities of life multiple times over. She wanted to do more because she wanted to prove that she could do what she knew she could do. She wanted to look the part. She got tired of successfully running Antonio's businesses and allowing him to get the credit. I think that says a lot about who she is as a person. It's like it's never enough. She had the money, but she needed the accolades too. She needed the accolades in a business that she initially never even wanted to be a part of. So she decides to start her own operation. She enlists Peaches' help to do this, which creates an avenue for them to spend a lot of time together and get really, really close. Peaches buys matching bracelets for them and gives more insight into the relationship between Antonio and the women. In the short version, you learn that Antonio gave Peaches the name because of her butt, and Cream was given her name because of the Wu-Tang Clan song Cream, which stands for Cash Rules Everything Around Me, which fits her perfectly. You learn that they were both working for Antonio's escort service. Peaches broke the rules and got pregnant and got herpes, messing up Antonio's business. He got the goons to punish her, and he made her dance for free until he felt like he had been reimbursed for all the money she made him lose. Oh yeah, and in the midst of all that, Peaches confided the pregnancy to Cream for some reason, and Cream told it, of course. You also learn that Cream and Sharon had a thing. Cream introduced Sharon to Antonio because she was struggling financially, thinking she'd just get some money from him. But Sharon takes her spot. Hearing all of that makes Shelonda feel like she really does need to create something for herself because she feels like Antonio has it in him to move on when the newness wears off. But that's probably just a really good excuse. You can tell that she liked the power. That's who she was. Anyway, Peaches tells her that she doesn't need to do business under her actual name, so she chooses to be called Star because Antonio always tells her that she looks like a movie star. She goes to Antonio with a plan. He doesn't want her to do it, but he understands that he can't really stop her. He does offer another warning, though. He tells her that his business comes first. If she finds that she can't do both, hers has to go. She uses the money that she took from him to open a bar and uses the exact setup of accounts and sub-accounts. She sets Peaches up to be a manager so she won't be under Antonio's thumb and allows her to have more access than she should have. She sets 3 rules that Peaches was to follow. Peaches was not to be romantically linked to anyone that they did business with. She wasn't to make any decisions without Shelonda's approval, and she wasn't to work with anyone outside of the approved list. We all know how that played out. I jumped all around that episode, but I think I covered the important stuff. Episode 16, Angelic Devil. Episode 16 basically breaks down the rules for the sole purpose of explaining how badly Peaches broke them. And then it breaks down the business structure for the sole purpose of introducing Angel. Sidebar. Angel was not an initial part of the story. Originally, a couple of these chapters were merged together. This was just the part where there was an elaboration about the rules and the business structure got thrown in there somewhere. Way after the fact, I realized a couple of things. 1, I realized that the chapter was super long, so I wanted to break it into 2 separate chapters. 2, I realized that I hadn't shown the type of growth and deviation in Shelonda that I found necessary. In book 1, she was all about Ken, and she was basically portrayed as a bit of a weakling. Seeing her step into this boss type of character, I kind of wanted her to be somebody who wasn't necessarily that person. I wanted her to stay somewhat true to the nature of who she was because there was always a man at the root of it all. However, I wanted her to puff out her chest a little bit. Her cheating on Antonio with Diablo slash Angel kind of signified that she wasn't this demure little girl that just took what was handed to her. It also signaled her progression as a woman. Angel was sexually different than Antonio, so it was a way of showing a different side of her as well. But back to the episode. I won't dig deep into the rules or the business structure because I think they speak for themselves. In the short version, Peaches wasn't to be romantically linked to anyone within their circle, and she wasn't to make decisions without Shelonda. As for the business structure, Shelonda was basically a distribution point between the big guys and 4 small guys. Diablo is Shelonda's point A. He sees how she runs our operation, and he thinks that she has the ability to go much further. He'll help her out, but that's conditional, of course, because there are things that she needs to do. She needs to fire her point C guys and replace them with 4 women that he has chosen. And she needs to agree to enter into an affair with him. She agrees to do both without hesitation. That's when she discovers his government name. It's kind of clever, and I think it is because I created it, that his 2 names are Angel and Diablo, which is Spanish for devil. Shelonda and Angel have sex that same day, and so starts their affair. Episode 17, Hungry Lion. I obviously don't use it in its entirety, but I often quote something from this chapter because I find it to be so profound. This episode starts with Shelonda talking about how Antonio always says it's important to pay more attention to what someone has done opposed to what you expect them to do. And to prove that point, she uses one of his quotes, which is an animal reference, obviously. And because it's one of my favorites, I'm going to quote it. It says, "Let me tell you something, little girl. Very few things will surprise you if you expect the worst from everybody, even people who have given you no reason to do so. But understand that you can't ever trust somebody who has crossed you. You can't even trust somebody who you understand has crossed someone else. Your love for a person will not stop them from being who they were truly intended to be. Let's say you're a trainer at a zoo. You may have the best relationship with the lion that no one else can tame. That lion may take a liking to you, and you may feel that you have earned its respect. But understand, if you fail to feed that lion one time, he will eat you. The fact that you wouldn't eat a lion will not be taken into consideration. That lion will eat you because the lion seeks to be full at any cost. That's why you got to keep your eyes open, little girl. Don't put your hand near the lion's mouth." I tell people all the time that they can't expect a lion not to eat them simply because they wouldn't eat a lion. But that quote ends up being so profound when you look at how everything played out between Shelonda and Peaches. Peaches hadn't ever betrayed Shelonda, but Antonio was trying to tell her that it didn't matter. She couldn't be trusted because of the general nature of the type of person she was. She sought to be full at any cost. So if you fail to feed her, she will eat you. But Shelonda did what she always did. She saw the good parts of Peaches, completely discrediting the bad parts that were right in her face. At some point, Peaches introduced the idea of expanding the business. Shelonda thought it was a good idea, but she was thinking it through because she didn't want to make bad business decisions. She started seeing a difference in Peaches, but she didn't really pay it any attention because she felt like they were just moving in different directions. What she didn't realize was, Friday rolls around and she goes to get her money out of the safe so she can make a deposit. Only there's no money. And ain't no mistake about who took it. Peaches is the only person with the combination. Of course, she tries to give her the benefit of the doubt because that's who Shelonda is. But deep down, she knows what's up. I really like the analogy that was used there as well. Shelonda goes back and thinks about the different ways that Antonio has described Peaches. At one point, he calls her a shrimp. And at another point, he calls her a lion. Those two things couldn't be on further ends of the spectrum. Yet Peaches really did fit into both. She was a shrimp because she was a scavenger. but she was a lion because she had this ferocious appetite. The thought of the two merged together in Shelonda's mind, and you realize that Peaches was in quite a precarious situation. She was a creature of excess, so she would overindulge. And she was a scavenger, so she'd take whatever was around. That's the very nature of an addictive personality. That's what they do. They're going to do too much of whatever it is that they do, whether it's food, drugs, or gambling. That's the lion's head with the shrimp's body. And at some point, it's going to pop. Anyway, Shelonda drives to Peaches' apartment. In spite of her car being there, she doesn't open the door. That does, however, place her in the perfect position to be nearby when Cream calls. Remember that Peaches and Cream live in the same apartment complex. Cream summons Shelonda over and asks, "What you done look good?" Which sets us up perfectly for episode 18, Breaking All the Rules. So now, Cream has to explain everything to Shelonda, and it sucks. I mean, it sucks real bad. If you remember, there were 3 rules. Don't date anyone that they were involved with, business-wise. Don't make any decisions without Shelonda's approval. Don't deal with anyone outside of the approved list. Peaches broke every single rule, starting with rule number 1, her decision to become involved with Styx, one of their former Point C guys. Then there was rule number 2. She made the decision to start an operation without Shelonda's approval, using Shelonda's money. Let's not forget that part. And number 3, she used Point A and Point C guys that were outside of their approved list. The Point A gave her bad drugs, but denied it and still wanted all of the money that was due to them. They started telling people that Antonio's operation wasn't paying up. Thinking it out, Shelonda trusted her Point A and their product. That's why that rule was in place. That never would have happened with Diablo. The Point C refused to pay and started telling people that Antonio's camp was passing bad drugs. That never would have happened in Shelonda's operation because she wouldn't ever have dealt with anyone who was connected to Antonio. They wouldn't ever have had that point of reference. That's why the rules are so important. Peaches breaking the rules blew up in everybody's faces. Sidebar. I often wonder what other people think about Shelonda's rationale. She was very specific about Peaches not sleeping with anyone in their circle, but she made the exception for herself. She says Peaches didn't know how to break the rules right, and her affair with Diablo had basically been beneficial enough to kind of justify it. And she was in charge, so she got a pass on breaking the rules. I don't know. Either way, now Shelonda understands what really happened, and she has to fix it. And if things aren't bad enough, she leaves and she gets a call from Cream. Somebody has burned down Antonio's club and Sharon's salon. Episode 19, Too Far Ahead. Y'all, I love this episode. Because when I tell y'all that Shelonda showed who she really was, she did not come to play that day. But in her defense, it started out really innocently. Shelonda goes to the jail to see Antonio. She knew she had to explain what Peaches had done, even though she wasn't the one that had done it, but she was in charge. She gets to the prison with the full intention to explain everything away. And she does just that, thinking Antonio is going to understand everything and cut her a break. But he is still mad with her. Why? Well, in the animal reference that he uses, Shelonda has chosen a wild dog to love and nurture. And even though she has treated that dog well, that dog will eat her with a pack of wild dogs that he has never met, because that's his very nature. His bother is that Shelonda was supplied with all of the information about the wild dog, aka Peaches, and she still chose to disregard it all, which is obviously detrimental to all involved. But he basically admits that he shouldn't have paired them together when he said, "I'm sorry, I should have given you a poodle." And for a second, Shelonda is taking it all in. It wasn't until Antonio made her feel belittled that things started to change for her. He told her that he shouldn't have depended on her to do anything other than multiplication because she isn't built like that. And that's when she went off. I absolutely love Shelonda's speech. Not only was it ballsy, but she gave so much back to Antonio using his own methodology. She uses an animal reference because that's what he does. She talks about the female praying mantis and their mating ritual. In the short version, if the female praying mantis thinks the male is worthy, she'll let him jump onto her back to mate. The female's back is much larger than the male's, by the way. At some point, the female will sometimes bite the male's head off during sex, simply because he thrusts harder without his head. The male is completely at the female's mercy. Shelonda uses this analogy as equivalency of her situation with Antonio. She basically says that she's carrying him, but she can dispose of him at any time. And if that's not enough, she throws all of his animal references back at him. She says, let me explain something to you, Antonio, because you're obviously not aware of who I am. I am not the scavenger shrimp that will eat you because you're available. I am not the clownfish that will eat what you provide for me. I am not the lion who will eat you because you have failed to feed me. I am not the feral dog that will eat you out of loyalty to someone else. I am the female praying mantis. I am carrying you, but understand that I will eat you for no reason other than my personal desire to do so. That's who I am. Don't you ever forget that. And make no mistake about it. You never gave Peaches to me. I took her, just like I took everything else. I was like, okay, girl. But Antonio, being the calm guy that he is, he was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. You got to sign my businesses and your business over to me when I get out. You got to tell your point A that he's going to be working with me and set up a meeting with him. And you got to replace Sharon's salon. That's what you're going to do, little girl. And Shelonda was like, why would I do that? And it'll be a cold day in purgatory before my point A works with you. She even said, I might replace Sharon's salon if y'all ask me nicely. When Antonio says, ask Peaches, Shelonda lets slip that she knows about him getting the goons to beat Peaches up. But that doesn't worry her. As far as she's concerned, they're her goons now. Since she took everything. This girl even tells him that he can call her Star, like the other dope boys. Anyway, he tells her to go see Peaches and to come back the next day. It's ominous, and we know why. And lastly, he says, it's going to be a cold day in purgatory. Make sure your Diablo has a jacket. It's crazy that he says that because you realize he has put a plan into motion already, like just that quickly. Antonio knows that after he's done with his plan, Diablo will be working with him, aka the cold day in purgatory, as Shelonda puts it. Episode 20, Stern Warnings. Shelonda drives to Peaches' apartment because she feels like she needs to put some fear into her. The way of the goons is to wreck the residence and leave a note. But when she gets there, she realizes that someone has already beaten her to the punch. Peaches' apartment is a wreck, which is completely unlike her. Shelonda searches the apartment room by room, looking for the note that she expects to find. For dramatic effect, she goes into Peaches' bedroom last. The bedroom is pristine. In my mind, I imagined it was like really cold, like in the movies. She goes into the bathroom, and she finally finds the note, and Peaches, and Sticks, dead in the bathtub. They're lying there, parallel to each other with bags over their faces. Also for dramatics, Shelonda takes off her glove to remove Peaches' bracelet and finds that her arm is still warm, letting her know that she was just killed. She vomits, takes the note, and then runs to her car. After getting to her hotel, she takes the time to read the note and finds the surprise of her life. She assumed that it would be addressed to whoever may have assisted Peaches, but it was addressed to her. The note says, remember not to get so far ahead of yourself that you get left behind. I caught a falling star and put it in my pocket, hopefully saving it for a rainy day. Love always, your Anemone. P.S. I really wish I had gotten you a poodle instead of a feral dog. Boy, I can't even imagine, because there are no discrepancies. Based on the conversation at the prison, she knew for sure that Antonio had arranged the hit, and He had done it in the 30 minutes that it had taken for her to get there. And just like he said before she left the prison, he would see her the next day. So, that's it for this sidebar. The next episode is titled The Saga Continues, and we're dwindling down to the final 4 episodes of this season, and the story gets even better. We'll talk about it all on the next Sidebar with Chinney. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to follow Chinney Tells a Story on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in purchasing books by Shandora Warren, they're all available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and some in hardback formats. Thank you for helping me to create the world that I want to see. Oh yeah, you're welcome. Shine, little girl.